welcome to Jason's in the House. I'm your host, Jason Parisella. I'm a real estate agent over at Keller Williams over at the Cummings Center. Nice to have you with us again. Our guest today is Gary Moffie. He's the president and owner of the Remodeling company here in Beverly, and Gary's company is actually at the Cummings Center also. Welcome, Gary. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Nice to be here, Jason.
Great. Hey, you know, I wanted to start. I was looking at, you had brought this Boston Design magazine, a guide to fine home furnishings, products, and services. And you had pointed out that you actually you're in this magazine. Now, can you kind of explain a little bit as we talk about your company a little bit?
Sure.
Might be able to get this on camera too as we talk.
This magazine is an annual publication, and it comes out in July of every year, and it features pretty much high-end residential remodeling projects. And we were fortunate enough to be selected this year as one of their 2 feature stories for a project that we just completed in Wellesley. We were on this project for 2 years. It was kind of a large project for us, and we just actually won 2 national awards for the design and the construction of this edition.
Wow.
Yeah,
so this is the house you actually worked on? It
was. This is a gatehouse in the front. They call it a gatehouse. It's a shed, and it's quite an expensive shed.
Wow.
Real stonework, slate roof. But the people use it as a shed. There's bicycles and lawn tractor and that kind of stuff in there, so it's pretty interesting.
Great.
But yeah, it was a great project. It took us 2 years to complete.
Wow. So how long have you been in business for?
We're in our 13th year right now.
13th year?
Yeah, and we're also at the Cummings Center. We've been there since we started.
Yeah, okay, great. So we talked a little bit about, obviously, you're doing a lot of the high-end projects. What other types of projects are you doing? Or what do you find generally people are doing right now?
Well, it's interesting. You know, since I started, kitchens and bathrooms have always been very popular, whether the economy was good or not. In good times, people tended to do larger kitchens, and they put more expensive appliances and cabinetry in them. But even in the downturn, like we've seen in the last couple of years, people still need to redo their kitchens, but they might not spend quite as much on appliances. It's a little bit more what I would call normal than it was before in the last few years.
So, you know, instead of the Vikings and, you know, whatever else, other appliances, maybe they're going to GE. And
right, instead of Viking and Wolf and Thermador, you know, they're going back to GE and Whirlpool and Maytag, which are all good products. You know, they've all come a long way over the years. And the cabinetry, instead of going completely custom, they're going maybe semi-custom, where the cabinets are made specifically for the customer, but they're not done in a real cabinet shop. They're more mass-produced.
So are you generally doing that type of work, kitchens and baths?
We do kitchens and baths. We do additions. Currently, we're doing a project on Beacon Hill in an old brownstone that we're renovating. Wow. And we also do, we have a handyman division. We do small little things that might take an hour. We found that there's a real need for that with customers and even people that we don't know. You know, they don't know who to call, that they can trust to come in, fix a door, fix a window, you know, fix a faucet. So we started a handyman division about 3 years ago, and that's been doing really well.
Yeah, from being a real estate agent, I know I run into a lot of times, you know, the first thing is trying to get a contractor to come to the house. And then secondly, you have these smaller projects that, you know, a contractor's looking for the big job, so that seems to be a niche. Yeah,
we pretty much run the gamut. We also do a lot of, we're actually a subcontractor for a large window manufacturer who approached us earlier this year and wanted us to take over all of their installs. So we have a separate division that does windows and doors. So we kind of cover the gamut.
That's good, yeah.
We're spread out a little bit, and then we've got various crews that handle just those types of projects.
Good, excellent. What types of questions should people ask consumers? What should they be aware of? What do they need to know before getting into a remodel? You know, that type of thing. Well, you get into a kitchen and bath, it's a big project.
Right, right. Well, the first thing they should think about is the budget, because what we have found over the years is the budget can really get out of control very quickly. So what I usually ask people is, give me your wish list. Tell me, in a perfect world, what would you like? And then we start talking numbers. And then I also ask them, what are the things that they absolutely have to have? So we try to strike a balance between the big wish list and what they have to have. And what we try to do is make sure that we hone in on a real solid budget to start, so that we don't start the project and then halfway into it, people find out that it's going to cost them double what they had planned. So the more that you can plan up front, the smoother the project will go.
Yeah, I mean, even from personal experience and talking to people, that's one of the issues where you start running over because you want this and that, and you get into the project.
Yeah, we call it project creep.
Yeah.
Is one of the things, and I also have a list that I say that people say to us, while you're here, could you?
Right.
So we call it the while you're here list.
Right.
You know, and there's always that. So you should always, I usually tell people, figure 10% more than what your budget is for that project, because you're going to find other things that you're going to want us to do when we're there.
Yep.
And that usually works out pretty well.
Yep. Anything else, any other questions or anything else that people should be concerned about before they start a project?
Well, you know, obviously you want to hire a professional, reliable, and reputable remodeler. And there are several things that you need to do about that. First, they should be licensed. You should see a copy of their license. They should also have an HIC registration number, which is a Massachusetts law where all contractors that are doing residential work have to be registered. What happens is, if something goes wrong on the project with a registered contractor, and let's say they leave or they don't finish the project and there's still things to do, the homeowner has the right to go to the state and collect up to $10,000 against the fund that we all put aside, because we pay our fees every year. If you hire an unregistered contractor or you pull the permit yourself, then you don't have access to that. So
now, but an unregistered contractor it's not legal to be unregistered, you're saying? It
is not, but I will tell you that there are.
Obviously, there's people out there that...
Right.
Okay.
That do it.
So it's an HIC number?
It's called an HIC number, Home Improvement Contractor Registration Number. So they need that. They need to have a builder's license. Mm-hmm. You should always have the contractor pull the permit. You don't want to pull the permit yourself. You also want to make sure that the contractor is insured. And in our case, what we do is we provide an insurance certificate to every homeowner that we work with, showing our liability insurance and, very importantly, our workers' compensation insurance. Mm-hmm. Somebody gets hurt on the job, you want to make sure that the contractor's workers' compensation insurance is going to cover that, and it's not going to come back to the homeowner to pay for it.
Right.
I always tell people, check references. When we give a proposal to people, we give them a list of anywhere between 8 and 10 references, people that they can call. We also suggest that they visit any of the sites that we've done so they can actually see our work. Mm-hmm. Check the website. It's one of the first things that you should probably do is go on the website and see, get a feel for what they do.
I mean, so what would you recommend, just generally? I mean, you would assume that people would potentially know a contractor through a friend or something, but just say somebody has no personal, referrals or anything like that. I mean, in your opinion, what source would they go to first? If they really had no leads from anybody, as far as who should they call or who talk to? Right.
There are in the remodeling industry, there are two major national trade associations. Both of these have local chapters pretty much throughout the country. One is called the National Association of Home Builders, NAHB, of which I'm a member. My company is a member. And we're a member of their Remodelers Council, which is kind of a subdivision. You can call the local chapter and get recommendations from them. Everybody that's a member really has to be professional. You have to have insurance, you have to be registered, if you're in Massachusetts, you have to have your license and a good reputation. You can also call the Better Business Bureau, although I don't think the Better Business Bureau will give you any recommendations, but you can certainly check with the BBB once you've kind of narrowed it down to several companies. I think that there are a couple of different ways depending on the size of your project. If you have a small project, I like to tell people, go find one contractor that you like and work with that contractor. Have him put the budget together and the design together, and that way you're really focused. Sometimes what happens, particularly on larger projects, is if an architect is involved and then it goes out to bid, by the time it goes out to bid, the budget numbers typically might not come in to what the original budget was, because there's been no collaboration between the architect and the builders.
Right.
So although on large projects you certainly need an architect, and I would recommend everyone get an architect, sometimes it's not such a good idea to get 3 proposals.
I see what you're saying.
If you get one and you trust that person and they've got good references, it can go a lot smoother.
So if they started with, just say they called you first before they call the architect, would you coordinate the architect?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you would coordinate that and just potentially but the point person would be the contractor right away.
That's right. Frequently we've done that. Yeah. People will call us, either they're referred to us from a friend of theirs who we worked for, or even we've had people call us from the website.
Yeah.
And we meet with them and they like us and they say, well, you know, we really need design work. We're not a design build company, which means we don't have an architect on staff.
Right.
But we work with several architects
You could recommend.
that we recommend, and then they interview the architects, and then we collaborate as a team, and it really works very well.
Yeah. Is there a website for what was the name of that association again, so people could check?
Yeah, I believe it's the NAHB, National Association of Home Builders.
NAHB.org,
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. The other association, by the way, is called NARI, N-A-R-I, which is the National Association of the Remodeling Industry.
Okay.
So they're specifically remodelers, and that's another good source as well.
Okay, excellent. You wanted to, we talked a little bit about CAPS. What's this CAPS program?
Right. The CAPS program is sponsored by the NAHB. It's one of the certifications that they offer, and as a contractor, as a member, I have to take classes and I have to take exams and I have to be certified. It stands for Certified Aging in Place Specialist, which basically means that I have the capabilities to go into someone's home, and if they have a disability, I can renovate their homes and know really what I'm doing. I'm not just a contractor that's going to go in and put in some grab bars in a shower.
So you know all the specs and all the things that they're available,
Right.
the products and things like that?
Right. It's called universal design, and it is for, sometimes we incorporate universal design in homes where there is no one with a disability, but they plan to stay there and retire there. And so we design doorways, for instance, that might be a little wider now, just in case at some point someone has a wheelchair. And we do things like that. And when you use universal design, you design it in such a way that it doesn't look like a nursing home or a hospital or something.
Yeah.
It looks residential.
Now, how do you get involved? Is there a certification of training? Or?
Yes, there was certification through the NAHB, and actually AARP helped design the program with NAHB that we had to take and then pass an exam.
Now let me just pull this book over here too. You brought this too for an example, like a walk-in tub that you could. So this is kind of a sample of a catalog with some products that are available.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and people like me who have this certification, you know, we understand what's out there, and we can help guide a consumer to the right places and show them things that they might not be aware of that may be of some help.
Yeah.
Several years ago, there were not a lot of options for walk-in tubs. Now, if you open up that book, there's dozens of options.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in the industry.
So you call maybe I don't know what word to use, maybe a typical contractor or whatever that doesn't have the certification, they might just pick out the tub that they know of and put it in and say this is a so-called, you label it a handicap tub. Well, people probably think there's only one handicap tub.
Right. They're not going to know, for the most part, they're not going to know about all the products that are out there.
Right.
And we do.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's an interesting thought too, to really kind of design your house if you're doing major renovations. If you're, like you said, you're thinking about staying there, that you maybe make the doorway a little bit wider, work with someone that can make it look like it, like you said, not looking like a nursing home or something that maybe people feel awkward about or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we get calls from occupational therapists who initially go in to make an evaluation on someone. Let's say they just came out of the hospital, had major surgery, or whether they have, a permanent disability, and the occupational therapist will go in, and then she decides frequently what's needed. And then they would call somebody like us, bring us in and help them design the features.
Now, we talked a little bit about how you'd find a contractor. How would you go about knowing who's certified on that front?
Again, you would go to the NAHB.
Okay.
Excuse me, sorry about that. I thought it was you would go to the NAHB, and on their website, they have a listing of CAPS certified contractors around the country.
Oh, I see.
So that's the best way to do it.
I mean, any idea how many people around this area are certified?
There are not many.
Yeah.
I've
never heard of even the program.
Yeah,
as a realtor.
There are not many. I believe when I got my certification 4 years ago, there were less than 100 in the Massachusetts area. So there aren't many. But with the aging population and the baby boomer generation getting older, it's going to become a lot more popular and I think there's going to be much more demand for this,
Yeah.
over the next 10 years or so,
Yeah.
10, 15 years.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about, and then I know we have some samples we want to show people too, but the new lead paint requirements, explain a little bit about that, what people need to be aware of on that.
Right. Well, the Environmental Protection Agency, this has been coming for several years. In April, the new regulations went into effect, and basically it says that for any home that was built prior to 1978, if you're doing any renovations basically over a 6-foot square area, which is pretty much just about anything you can think of,
yeah.
You need to have a contractor who is certified by the EPA to do that work. To become certified, you have to take a full-day class and you have to take an exam. The company also has to be registered with the EPA. My company is certified with the EPA. And there are several things, there's quite a few things that need to be done depending on the situation and the circumstance. But it's basically to minimize even further the amount of lead dust that gets into the air during renovations. Mm-hmm. And in the past, I think some type of legislation was needed, in my opinion, because there's a lot of sloppy
It's the
contractors
dust
out
too
there.
that you think. You
Yeah.
think it's the paint that, the chips that come off, it's the dust.
It's the dust.
It's the dust,
And sometimes you can't see the dust. You can
Right.
get lead paint poisoning just by having lead paint on your windows and opening them up every day, and that microscopic dust gets in the air, and you can get lead paint poisoning.
Yeah.
So we now have to go through all different types of procedures to make sure that we minimize that.
I mean, I think as a consumer, yeah, this stuff's probably good. However, I'm sure there's a cost to it too.
There is a cost to it.
You're gonna have to, if you start talking about sealing off an area with a contractor, you're gonna have to pay probably more money.
Well, it's not even that. I mean, typically we would seal off areas when we're doing construction in a person's home, just because you don't want any kind of dust to travel into living areas.
Right.
And we work in people's homes all the time, whether we're doing a kitchen or an addition or a bathroom on the second floor. So we have to be very careful about that.
Right.
But now, part of the regulation is if we take a window out, for instance, that has lead paint on it, we have to wrap it in plastic, almost like gift wrapping it, and place it in the dumpster wrapped.
Oh, I see. Even when you put it in the dumpster.
Right. Any debris that we take out of the house has to go into a plastic bag first, and the plastic bag then gets put into the dumpster. Where before we could put a chute out a window and just shoot everything down the dumpster.
Right.
If the house has lead paint in it, you can't do that anymore. We also have the ability to test. So they've given us the tools to do the testing. We're not a lead abatement company. That's a totally separate thing.
Right.
But we have the tools to test, so that sometimes you go into a house that was built prior to 1978. We're working on a house right now that was built prior to 78, but the room we're working in had been previously renovated since 78. So we tested it. It had no lead, so we could proceed without having to do the RRP. But they stopped using lead in 1978, but it could be, if your house has been painted several times, it could be underneath.
Underneath it, yeah. That's what I've heard. We've learned about it through selling houses.
But it does add cost.
Yeah.
No question about it.
All right, so let's get into some of the samples.
Sure.
And one of the things I want to talk about first is Azek. Is that how you pronounce it?
Azek.
Azek.
Yep.
And Azek, explain what Azek is.
I think
it's a great product.
Yeah, it is basically it's a plastic. Okay, it's a type of plastic. We use this
There's another type here. I'll see if I can get this.
Yeah, this is used primarily on the exterior of homes, on the trim. We do most of our work is on older homes, and it's with architects. It tends to be, on the large projects, tends to be high end, and so we didn't use this for years because when it first came out, there wasn't much detail to it. So we used things like cedar, or we would use pine, or even Spanish cedar or mahogany, but that stuff is expensive. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be maintained. Now with the Azek, they've developed a product now that has detail to it. And when we use this on the trim, you really can't tell the difference between that and the wood.
So if you have the wood shingles, for example, and then you have this next to it, now you can paint this too.
You can paint it with an acrylic paint, but if your trim happens to be white, you don't have to paint it at all.
And then you could, you were telling me earlier too, you can just like a piece of wood, you can router it or cut it or
I can
whatever.
shape it, I can cut it, I can route it, I can do pretty much whatever I do with wood, I can do with Azek.
Now, what's the well, first of all, I would assume you normally would use like a pine trim.
We used to use pine.
Just curious about the difference. Well, all right, whatever type. What would you use now for wood trim?
We use a lot of Spanish cedar.
Okay, so what's the difference of cost between the Azek and the Spanish cedar?
Last time I checked, the Spanish cedar is going to cost a little bit more. But
it is going to cost more than this.
But
okay.
You also have to factor in, too, that with the Spanish cedar, it has to be primed and painted. So if you've got
this
white,
is, yeah.
You don't have to do that at all.
So, yeah, the cost of that.
Right.
So that's it. So how about a pine board compared to the Azek?
This would be a lot more expensive.
A lot more expensive.
And we wouldn't use pine anymore in the exterior. The pine that we get now is basically new growth, and it's not as stable as what they used on houses back at the turn of the century and through 1910, 1920s, 30s. And so it's not stable. And so what's happening is that a lot of new homes that they used pine on, it shrinks.
There's so much movement.
It moves, it shrinks,
Yeah.
it cracks, then the paint fails, and then you get rot, and then
Yeah.
you get insects. This is insect resistant, it's mold resistant, it's rot resistant. The manufacturer has a warranty on this, I believe, of 25 years. So,
So you
it's a
pay
great
a little bit
product.
more up front. However, I would think you're saving money in the long run
Absolutely.
without replacing or painting and things
Right.
like that.
We just did a house, a good customer of ours asked us to take all of the trim off their house, and they have a cedar clapboard sided house, and we replaced it all with Azek.
This is not Azek,
Right.
but this is another type of, what would you call it, man-made material that you could use for?
It is. And this is a sleeve, actually. It's an MDO board inside, which is a type
So
of
it's like
composite board that's made to go outside. They use it for signs, and we use it for paneling and that kind of thing outside. It has to be painted. But in this case, they've clad it with a poly, I think it's a polycarbonate cladding.
Yeah.
And what we do is if we're building a front porch or even a deck, we'll put a 4x4 post in, and then we'll slide that right over it, trim it out, and no maintenance.
Yeah.
And you can see now what I was talking about with the detail.
So you have this
You've got a bead here, yeah. It's a nice bead where when these products first started coming out, they really weren't putting that detail in there. I don't think they had the capabilities to do it.
Yeah.
And now they do, so you can really get some nice looking trim out of this stuff.
What'd you say it was
MDO
MDO?
in the inside.
Yeah. Okay. Well, who manufactures this one? I was just curious.
I'm not sure. There's several
it's-
companies that manufacture that. It's not like an Azek product.
Yeah.
It's a pretty standard product that you can get from different companies.
Okay. This is a Trex sample.
This is Trex. This is Trex decking, and
Excuse me 1 minute. Obviously, we're talking about some of the newer, things that are the man-made materials that you feel like are a good option for
That's
people.
right, absolutely. From a cost standpoint, a maintenance standpoint, maintenance particularly, we're finding more and more people want to get away from maintenance.
Yeah.
People lead busy lives, husband and wife both working, kids, not a lot of time to sand and stain the deck every year. Again, we were not using this material several years ago because when these composite decks came out, there was not a lot of detail to them.
Well, I noticed too, some of the older decks, it really looks plasticky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look cheesy.
And I've noticed too, they do, so this stuff still moves and things. I mean,
Nothing won't, concrete
yeah.
basically might not move.
Right.
But the other thing is that some of the products actually were not mold resistant. So even though they would last, they would get moldy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Trex is not one of those. Trex has held up pretty nicely.
Now wasn't Trex one of the original manufacturers?
Yeah. And if you notice in this case, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but what they show is this is the Trex, this is the original color, and this is after they've put it under a sunlight and fading test. So you can see.
Oh, I see. They'll show you right up front.
So they show
what
you
it's going to look like.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you look at the other side, this has a grain to it. The other side shows a sample of a smooth finish. So you can get the Trex in a smooth finish if you like that as well.
Yeah.
So either way.
Okay.
And most of the manufacturers will do that.
Yeah.
This
Now-
is made from wood products, wood byproducts, plastic bags, grocery bags.
Because I was
and-
going to ask
and
you too on
plastic.
this whole green movement. Would this be considered kind of a green?
It is.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
this
What
is
about the
recycled.
Azek?
I think it is. When you say green, there's
Yeah,
a
I know there's a.
yeah. I think the Azek would be green because you're not using wood. You're not cutting trees down to
Right.
make the trim.
But maybe this isn't as. This is more of a kind
is
of
more
a
recycled.
recycled product.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have you brought a couple flooring samples here.
Yeah, these are some, this is a company up in New Hampshire, Carlisle Wood Floors, that specializes in all kinds of wood flooring. This sample is a sample of heart pine, which was found in homes in the 20s and 30s. And then that is a piece of mahogany. Both have a stain on them. I have all kinds of samples. We've done hickory, you know, you name it, maple, birch, oak. You can get oak in the wide.
Now, why do you, okay, so why do you like this company, for example? What do you look for in this?
I look for stability, and if you look at those samples, they're perfectly straight. There's no cupping, there's no warping. I've had those in my office for probably a year.
Really? So that's, yeah, so you want to look, okay.
Yeah, this company dries their wood beautifully. When they ship it, it's all shipped carefully, so it comes to us in neat stacks, and so very little damage. They stand behind their product if there is a problem. They also supply the stains if you want to stain. It's a very good company.
Now, I don't know if you can see this either on the camera, but see now, we talked a little about this a little bit earlier with the, now this is a solid wood floor.
That's right.
Because now, I run into it myself as a realtor.
Yep.
You're at these home inspections, and the home inspector's trying to figure out, is this, you know, a veneer, or what do you call it?
An engineered floor?
Engineered, or the other one, the Pergo type floor,
Pergo,
that's
right.
not any wood.
Right.
You can't even tell anymore.
Right.
I actually ran into an issue because the buyer really couldn't figure out what it was. Now, this is a solid floor,
That's
but
solid
they have
floor.
engineered floors.
They do. This is a 3/4, typically your wood floors are going to be 3/4 of an inch.
So the whole thing's wood.
Solid wood, it
Now,
came
what
right out
happens
of
with
the
the
tree.
engineered floor?
The engineered floor, what they do is they take this, you'll have the same wood on top, but it's a veneer. And then underneath it, there's layers at 90 degrees from each other, like plywood, which basically keeps it stable. So, and the engineered floor is pre-finished. So you put it in and you walk on it the same day. With this floor, you put it in and then you sand it, stain it, and then you have to put the urethane on it, and it could take a week. And if it's a very humid weather, it could take longer than a week, because you have to make sure everything dries. So the engineered floor has advantages as far as you know, putting installation. If you're in a hurry, or if the customer is in a hurry, or you know, they can't wait a week and a half to have the floor put in. It's also very good in basements. You know, you can put it over concrete, over another layer, over a moisture barrier, and it's a nice floor where you might not, typically wouldn't put a wood floor down in a basement.
Yeah, okay. So would you recommend more of an engineered floor or a wood floor?
I like the wood floors.
Yeah.
I do. The engineered floors, I think, are great, you know, in the right application. But what you find with an engineered floor is that where the seams line up, you're not going to get this square cut. So if you put these two pieces together, they're going to go together nice and tight, okay, almost like this table.
On the wood floor?
On the wood floor. On the engineered floor, the edges are eased just slightly, so that when you look at the floor, you tend to see like a little groove. And they're much better than they were 10 years ago, but you still see that. For some people, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the quality of the floor at all. It's really aesthetics.
Now, the other thing too is, obviously, I would think if it's a veneer, you know, how many times can you sand it? You
know, it depends on it. I would say probably a few, but they last a long time. We would typically put 3 coats of urethane on a real wood floor when we install it. An engineered floor could have 7 to 10 layers, so it's gonna hold up to heavy traffic a little bit better than the finish on a wood floor.
Right. Okay, yeah, so it's got the, all right, so it's probably more durable up front.
It's more durable, but,
yeah.
So you won't have to sand it as many times over the course of years. But, I mean, I wouldn't hesitate putting in either floor. It just depends on the application. I mean,
most people, what are most people saying? Or do they really, do they know that there's differences?
Yeah, the projects that we do, primarily, most people do the wood floors. Although when we do a basement renovation, if we do a playroom or something like that, we'll use an engineered floor, typically.
Right.
But usually we'll use a wood floor,
okay.
like what you see there.
Right. What else do we have here? We talked about the licensing. What about permits? As far as pulling permits?
Right. They're required, and the
I
homeowner
find too
should
that
not
most
pull
people,
the permit.
yeah, a lot of people don't pull permits.
No, it's not
they
supposed
do
to
things.
Yeah. You know, for any renovation, even a window replacement, you know, the law states you're supposed to pull a permit. I mean, if you're painting your house, you don't need to pull a permit. but in general, you need to pull a permit.
The other thing I run into too is when people pull permits and a lot of times they're not ever signed off on.
Right, right.
They pull it and then they're
Right.
done with the job and they just leave
Right.
and there's nothing.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
say.
it's an administrative problem, depending on the town. We work in a lot of different towns, so some towns are a little stricter about it. But if I go in to pull a permit on a house and there's an open permit, it will delay the permit process until that old permit gets signed off. So
Okay.
that's why you want a reputable contractor who's going to pull a permit, get his inspections, and get the sign off.
Get it signed off.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, let's wrap it up. How would, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, how could they contact you?
Well, we're right in the Cummings Center. They can call. Should I give my number?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's
Website or whatever you got.
978-921-9111. Pretty easy number. We also have a website, www.theremodelingco.com. Those are probably the two best ways to contact us.
Which building are you in at the Cummings Center?
100.
100 building.
Yeah,
Yeah,
on the
so you go to the front desk there and they can,
Yeah.
because that place is so big.
I always tell people to bring breadcrumbs so they know how to get out once they get in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, great. Well, thank you again for watching Jason's in the House. We really appreciate you watching. We want to thank BevCam for all their help. And if you have any questions for myself, want to be a guest on the show or anything at all, you can always visit my website, which is jasonparisellateam.com. And thank you. We'll see you next time.